Record. So, good evening, Declan. Thank you for joining me tonight for this interview, which will take a look at your career in youth football and your recent experience of working in Africa.
Yeah, no
So,
worries, my pleasure.
cool. So to kick off the interview, the first question: what made you go down the route of coaching in youth football?
Well, my dad was a coach, and so he'd always give me some tips as I was younger. And then as I was still playing, I was getting injured a lot towards 17, 18, 19 years old. So I just found it a lot smoother in that transition to go from playing to coaching. And then because my enjoyment had started to decrease slightly because of the injuries, just taken away from it a little bit. So when I got into coaching, I just kind of got my love back for it a lot more. I enrolled in a college course, started going some of my badges, started to coach a team, and it all just kind of clicked together, and I really, really enjoyed it. And here it is 5 years later or whatever it is.
Awesome. So what would be your top highlight from that sort of early start in the youth coaching?
Mm-hmm. The highlight back then, or the highlight overall from then to
The
now?
back then, and then after.
Yeah, I mean, the first football team I ever coached and took was at Lochend. They were the 2006s, but at that time they were only then under 10s. I know they're older now. They were amazing to work with, such a good group to get as your first team. So they were a highlight. And then I really enjoyed college. I went through to New College, Lanarkshire, and I was with like Todd Lumsden, Sandy Clark, Alan Moore, who were really good tutors and lecturers. So they were early highlights, and that's kind of what they were, the first sort of stepping stones, which I was able to progress and push on. The main highlight, if you're talking about overall for the whole coaching career, obviously Hearts has had a lot of plus points to it. There's been a lot of good memories there from winning that tournament last year against Arsenal and such like. And then the trips, being able to go to Africa was through coaching. I would never have been able to go other than for a holiday if it wasn't for coaching. So I go across there, I put on a big charity project. I was coaching at local schools, local charity organisations and clubs, delivering talks and presentations. So it was all coaching related, and that was just an amazing trip that I'll remember for the rest of my life, really.
Awesome. So taking a look at your own football academy, which aspects of a youth player's game do you feel are most important to sort of nurture?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of technical based, along with the psychological stuff. I mean, physical stuff, it all comes in their own times. They all mature at different rates. Physically, I just do a lot of technical stuff, and then I try and put a lot of responsibility back onto them. Are they going to deal with hardships and setbacks and failures? Will they take responsibility and accountability for their own things, their own mistakes, their own journey? So I touch on a lot of that. I try and put a lot of things onto them and see how they deal with it. And then my actual drills and session-based is always technical, whether it's ball mastery, ball manipulation, patterns and combinations, little phases of play, and isolated individual stuff I do a lot of.
So on your promotional video, Adam King, who sort of plies his trade for Dundee United just now,
yes.
How do you think you have to adjust your coaching style to suit a sort of senior footballer compared to a youth player?
Well, that's one of the things that I like about it so much is, I mean, I'm kind of lucky. My academy is all kind of high-level players. That's what it's been marketed as. But even then, still, if I've got a high-level 9 or 10-year-old to working with someone like Adam King, I've done sessions with like Anthony McDonald at Hearts, Chrissy Hamilton, Keane O'Connor, it is completely different. Mostly your communication, how you speak to them. The way I speak to Adam King is different from the way I speak to a 10-year-old. So how you put your stuff across, your information within the drills, and kind of the relationship you'll create with them varies a lot. So that's probably the biggest difference, is your level of communication and the sort of relationship you can create through that.
Cool. So in terms of inspiration, you mentioned your dad was also a coach when you were growing up. As a coach, who would you sort of look up to?
Well, I try and take a lot of different things from anybody. I mean, the old cliche, the old expression is you can always learn off anybody. So, if you see somebody that isn't doing a particularly good job, then you know what not to do. So you can always take something from that. In terms of inspiration, some of my favourite managers that I like to relate to is you're talking about the highest level. I like your Jurgen Klopp type and Diego Simeone. In terms of on a personal level, my dad he's been all right with me. When I first started, he was all right, and then there's people at Lochend that I've helped, and at Hearts I've had a lot of good mentors as well. But I just try to take little things from anybody. Met a lot of good people on the licenses.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a lot of people that are not so good on these courses as well. And as I say, you take for that, you learn for that. You know what you're not going to do is copy that guy that's done this and done that. So, that's how I approach it.
So, following a spell in Africa, you were saying. So, what were your main highlights of sort of getting the chance to work out there?
Well, it was charity based. I had a couple of contacts across there. It was actually it was my deputy head teacher when I was at high school. He went over there and started to head up some schools in Tanzania, and then I had my own personal contacts in South Africa and Cape Town. So I kind of just put a plan together where I could go across there, meet them both, make it one big trip, head to South Africa first, obviously with that being the furthest away, do my stuff in Cape Town, get a flight up to Tanzania, and do stuff there. So it was just over a month, the trip. It was probably the best thing I've ever done. I really, really loved it. Just completely different. It just feels like a real adventure, a real journey, but also something that had importance and relevance to it as well, impacting kind of on those kids' lives that are in charity sort of backgrounds and set up over there, to give them a little bit of what we do here in Scotland, and like from my background in academies and having UEFA qualifications. They're never going to get that. They're playing. Some of them are playing barefoot on a clay surface. So to go and give a little bit back, for me, it was a great learning curve myself. I was going and presenting in the primary schools, the secondary schools. Then I'd go out and take a field session. Had a lot of contact with our PE teachers, or just the general sort of teachers there that were great people. But the biggest thing was, the kids were just so happy. They have nothing, but then they have nothing to compare it against either. I mean, a kid here might have £100 trainers, but he's not happy because his mate's got £150 trainers.
Yeah.
Over there, there's none of that. So there was just a real purity to it. They were just so happy, smiling. They barely got anything, but they just appreciated what they had. And they were really, really kind to me. And it's something I'd actually like to go back and do maybe in a year or two's time, and go back and revisit it or go to different parts. It was amazing, a real amazing journey.
Awesome. So, sort of taking in the two differences in culture in Scotland and in, say, Africa. Yeah. How do you think like football resonates in young people like over there?
They love football. I mean, the kind of football I was delivering, because it was at schools and charities, and then obviously here I work with my own academy with a high standard of player, and at Hearts that's supposed to be elite. So it was hard to compare in terms of their like mindset or attitude towards that. I was having a lot of sort of enjoyment and fun with the kids in Africa and just trying to engage with them. But they love it. They would speak. There was actually a Tanzanian player that I think signed for Aston Villa last year, and they just all go out to watch Aston Villa play now because he's there, and it's just they're just happy. They're just happy with whatever sort of thing they can find an interest in. So that's what I'd say.
That's really cool. What were the main sort of challenges that you sort of encountered when you were sort of
facilities? And it's taking going for the Oriam. Have you been to the Oriam yourself?
I've been a couple of times, yeah. But
yeah,
like
so you'll know what it's like. The Oriam, it's a fantastic facility. It's obviously Scotland's sports performance centre, and that's where we're based with Hearts. And I'm quite lucky at Lochend for having an academy. That's a good facility. In Africa, I was on a pitch, and as I was about to start a session, there was goats. There was goats on the pitch. So or the grass field. You can't even really call it a pitch. So before I was doing the session, I had to get one of the people to get the goats off the pitch. So it's just night and day in that sense. So the facilities they struggle with. They just don't have good facilities for sport or for football. Try to think of what else is a real difference. Obviously, kind of finance kind of coincides with facilities. Finance, facilities, and any sort of like infrastructure or curriculum. There's nothing there that's kind of structured and set, and this is what we'll do at this level, foundation phase. This is what we'll do at this middle phase. This is what we'll do at an elite phase. There's none of that, or none that I encountered anyway. So I know there's an academy in Ghana now that's doing well, and they're doing the right things. Obviously, I never came with them, but I think it's the Right to Dream academy that I know a coach that went there. So it's good that you are seeing it develop in some parts of Africa. I just never came across it in South Africa or Tanzania myself, but that's the main things: facilities, finance, and then any sort of structure, curriculum in place.
How did you find sort of dealing with? Was there any sort of language barriers between?
Most of the kids, I mean, the Scottish accent can be hard to understand when you go abroad anywhere, but no, they were quite good compared to some other places I've been, and all the teachers at the schools or the helpers at the charity organisations would they would kind of interpret for me if need be, and I really tried to involve them anyway. That was part of what I wanted to do, was so when I leave, it's not just as I'm gone, so there's no sessions. I wanted it to be that if I involved the coaches or teachers, that they could keep it going. They would have an understanding of what I'd done, and I've been in contact with a lot of them since to send them over stuff on the computer, on the laptop. So I'd get them involved in the session. I'd tell them, give them a little bit of responsibility, tell them to go deliver that part over there. And I've done a few Zoom calls with them actually recently, and they said that they've been able to continue on, which for me is really pleasing to hear.
Have you got any sort of plans to maybe go back?
I'd love to. I actually just had some very unfortunate news that my deputy head teacher, who had arranged it, actually passed away in his sleep last week, which was really quite tragic. I mean, he was only 67 as well, so it's quite young still in this generation now. So he passed away, and I think he had a heart attack during the night. So that was really sad, as it was obviously kind of through him that it had initially been arranged. But I have all the contacts now of the actual Tanzanian, the actual African teachers. So I'd love to go back across maybe next year. Obviously, there's a lot of problems just now with travel anyway, with the situation that we're all in. But once things are a little bit settled down and cleared, I'd love to. It'd be amazing to get back across again.
Sort of taking into consideration the sort of differences in, say, facilities and finance as well, is there anything that you would take into consideration when you're coaching back here? Is there anything you would like bring to your game? Yeah,
well, in terms of like values and things like that, it made me appreciate, or made me want to pass on to the kids. They should appreciate what they have here. You know, £200 football boots. You're training at the Oriam. You're given all this brand new kit. You've got coaches that have spent thousands of pounds on their licence, or the clubs put them through all that. So I was trying to get across to the kids to understand and appreciate and value that. For me, it made me understand and appreciate a lot of different things. But you could see with some of the players, with the pitches they were playing on, it's all lumps and bumps and holes, and they're still controlling the ball and doing this and that. And, you know, it made me think, if this kid was actually playing at the Oriam, how good would he be? So it's just allowing them maybe one day to be given that opportunity to train on a lot better surfaces and surroundings. But no, there was a lot of takeaways from it. Mostly value things rather than things I could put into a training session. More things that were in my mind that I could pass on to the kids when I'm speaking to them, and for myself.
Yeah, perfect. And the final question of the interview, how has youth football sort of evolved since you began until now? How do you think it's sort of evolved?
I mean, there's a lot of I could go on for ages on youth football here, and so I'll try and bring my answer down a little bit. But there's a lot of things, a lot of pros and cons. There's a lot of good things and a lot of things that I think should change. I'm a big believer in that we should have our own Scottish way and really believe in it with youth football. I mean, I think it's completely pointless trying to copy the Belgian model, the German model, the Spanish model. I don't think that's like relevant at all. You can't copy what someone else has done. We've got a different environment, different mindsets, different culture. What works for Belgium doesn't necessarily work for us. And then I also think if it didn't work after 2 years, that we just chuck it. It probably takes 10 to 12 years for these things to show anyway, because it'll be with your youngest players 10 years later breaking through. So I think we really need to put our best minds together, really show initiative and common sense and competence with it, put in place a Scottish structure that's relevant for Scottish kids and for us, what we have, and stick with it. You know, don't just chuck it. If 2 years later you don't think it's working, that doesn't even make sense. You know, it's for 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids, or even younger than that, what they're going to be like when they're 17, 18. So big believer in that. In terms of some of the good things, we have some really, really good young players. That's the main thing for me. I mean, speaking firsthand, my Hearts boys competed against Arsenal and Brighton, and they've competed against other teams and beaten them, or done well, or competed in terms of performance. But Hearts first team isn't going to compete with Arsenal first team. So what goes wrong? And yes, I know that big transfer come in. It's not just an academy against academy. So at first team level, there's a lot of finance things, but we have some very, very good players at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. Something seems to go slightly wrong on that periphery of the first team, 17, 18. So maybe just managing that and having the same standard of player at 12 that he's still at that level when he's at a first team in comparison to an Arsenal player or whatever, and developing elite world-class players. Because sometimes when you speak about world-class, you get laughed off, but that really should be the aim, should it not? I mean, Wales developed Gareth Bale, you've got Lewandowski, Poland. Uruguay is a nation of similar population. I think they've actually got less population than Scotland. They can do it. So I think it's a Scottish thing to kind of knock people that are maybe trying to be innovative or creative or talk about things at a high level and a high order. But we need to start thinking about developing world-class players through a world-class curriculum and structure. So hopefully that can come to fruition.
As a sort of aside, do you think maybe belief in the sort of, do you think that could be the sort of missing key, that sort of the culture in Scotland is a lack of belief in our sort of national teams? Do you think that could be?
100%. We lack self-confidence and self-belief for these things, and we've got a culture of kind of maybe happy to speak about someone else, or downgrade their session, or talk badly about this player, or parents speak badly about this. And we should be building everything up, building our coaches up, building our licenses up, our infrastructure up, the level of player that we have up, not downgrading it, not talk. You see, you know, a rival club, without mentioning names, rival clubs, or another rival club will badly talk about this other player, and you're like, that's a Scotland player though. You know, you want him to go on to be sold for big money, to play in our first team at national level. You know, let's big these players up, get them going for more money on a bigger scale. So I think you're spot on. It's definitely self-belief and self-confidence, and also that comes to do with the copying. Why would you copy Belgium or Iceland or Germany or Spain if you had self-belief and confidence in yourself and what we can do and produce as coaches, as players, as a nation?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you can see, say, Germany in 2002 and Germany in 2012 is a totally different team and different setup, and same with the Spanish as well. So you can see that what you're saying is.
It's funny you say that. I was actually having a chat with one of the Hearts coaches last night, and we talked about Germany in 2000. That's exactly the example we used, that they had a major changeover after not having success in I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s. They put a completely new structure in place, and lo and behold, 10 years later, they reap the reward of it when they have Müller, Toni Kroos, Khedira, Ozil, Hummels, Royce all come through roughly within 1-2 years of each other because of what they'd done 10 years prior. You know, it's not going to change overnight. That's the long-term plan. So you need to put a long-term plan in place that makes sense and stick to it.
Definitely. Like, I suppose Germany had that sort of almost the Euros for hell, like 2004, where they did use a lot of young players and it didn't quite work, but they stuck with that. I think maybe Scotland needs to go down a similar sort of avenue, and if it doesn't kind of work, just stick to it, because you can see the rewards eventually.
Exactly. The rewards will come in time. It's just there's not always going to be instant success or tomorrow night success. It's going to be something that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of planning, and a lot of resilience at times to stick to it and adherence. But you'll reap the rewards down the line. I mean, we have some fantastic young players, and I mean, it's good to now see like Billy Gilmore doing well and whatever else, and you hope there's a few others of that sort of similar level and age that will go into the same level of performance at the level of club that he's doing it at. And then hopefully 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years later, there's 10, 12, 15 more. That's what you want. That's got to be the aim. So, no, 100%.
Well, thanks very much for coming on and talking to me about your career and Africa. Well, thank you.
No, thank you very much. It was good questions, so happy to do it.
Cheers. Thank you.
Brilliant.